And welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Pat Novak, and once again, we're heading into another Poland training camp. This time with a crucial World Cup qualifier against Finland and a rematch against Moldova on the horizon. But before we dive into all things national team, we're going to be first kicking things off with the Ekstraklasa, which has just wrapped up yet another dramatic season. And actually, before we get into even that, I do want to share some exciting news, as we've recently officially launched our Discord server. And this is something that I've seen folks have been asking about for, years now, kind of like with the podcast itself. And we finally decided, hey, the time was right to make it happen. It's a dedicated space for all things Polish football, entirely in English, of course. And it's live now. If you want to support our project here, what we're doing, and join the community, you can do so by accessing it through wap.com/PolishFootball. Yeah, it's been a long time coming, like I said, and of course, it's gonna take the online Polish football and English community to really make it thrive. But hey, now no one can say we don't have a podcast or a Discord server. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. This past Ekstraklasa season, oh boy, and what a season it was. With a tight title race between Lech Poznań and Raków Częstochowa, all eyes were on Raków to seal the deal, especially with Marek Papsun back at the helm there. It did really feel like a sure thing, and with Raków in the driver's seat, poised to hand Papsun yet another Mistrz Polski title, that's not exactly how things played out in the end. Suffice to say, Raków, you blew it. Not just with that 1-1 draw against Korona Kielce in the penultimate match day, but also by dropping points to Pogoń, Jaga, and even the bottom of the table dwellers, Pusa. Just narrow draws and losses that ultimately cost them, the title. Papsun's ultra-defensive tactics were also a double-edged sword, surely, as, Raków conceded the fewest goals in the league, like just 23. That's impressive, but at the same time, they only scored 51, which is the lowest among all of the top 6 clubs. So it's not the best. And his game plan also wasn't about beautiful, attractive football, because, let's be honest now, Raków were, painful to watch this season. It was all about locking it down and trying to edge out 1-0 wins. That's not really something very exciting, like week after week. And it also gets quite predictable too. But when they needed more than just one goal, then they couldn't do it. It felt unnatural. Nothing like the old Raków sides under Papsun, at least. Back when he was a serious candidate for the Poland job and plenty preferred him over Michał Probierz. But since missing out on that selection at a role, Papsun, he's changed and not for the better. He's become, he's doubled down on his ultra-defensive tactics and relying even more so heavily on foreign players, as for the most part this season, Raków's lineup featured maybe, 1 or 2 Polish players. And it was usually just the goalkeeper Tralowski holding it down for the homegrown contingent. And Papsun's stance on all of this, for him it doesn't matter where the players come from for as long as they win, and win 1-0. But they didn't do that. They choked and, handed the title straight to Lech Poznań. Now, for Lech, they started the season well, but then everything fell apart. It was from sloppy play, inconsistency, you name it. They looked like a shadow of their former selves. And at one point, Coach Niels Fredriksen's job was also seriously in doubt, and yeah, rightfully so. Lech, like Raków, even dropped points to Puszcza, who finished dead last in the league. Yeah, that's not a great look. Two big clubs losing to the last place team like that. It's, not good at all. But hey, unlike Raków, Lech managed to steady the ship late into the season, and just in time. From February onward, they improved, and luckily for them, Raków kept on slipping. And that's what ultimately opened the door for the Kolejos. So yeah, while I do want to congratulate Lech on winning their 9th Mistrz Polski title, I also can't say they were dominant or convincing in doing so, as it felt more like they won by kinda default, where everyone else just didn't want it enough. And, that's not really something brand new when it comes to Polish football. You just kind of get seasons like that from time to time, and yeah, we got that right now, and if that's concerning, well, if Lech do want to make any noise in Europe next season, then, they're gonna have to step it up. Bring in some quality reinforcements, strengthen the squad to compete on multiple fronts, 3, and most importantly, replace key players like Afonso Sosa, as well, he's likely to be leaving this summer, and he's been massive for Lech this season, like 13 goals, 6 assists, and also he scored a decisive winner against Piast to seal the deal. Well, seal the title for Lech. So yeah, no shade to the Kolejos. I want all Polish clubs to do well in Europe, but yeah, they gotta raise the bar here. Now, let's shift over next to Jagiellonia Białystok and Legia Warsaw, both of whom were in the Conference League this season. And yeah, Jaga had, a solid season. Strong in both Europe and domestically. Legia, on the other hand, more of a roller coaster, I'd say, as in Europe, they were beasts at one point, beating out finalists like Real Betis and later even Chelsea, and actually were the only side to beat the Blues in the entire competition. But yeah, domestically, it was a big letdown. They finished 5th, just behind Pogoń Szczecin. And even though they did beat Pogoń in the Puchar Polski final, which, secured Legia Europa League qualifying spot, so there's at least that. The season wasn't a total waste. Still, it wasn't enough to keep Gonçalo Feio as coach. Actually, that's only partly because of the so-so season, but also really because Feio reportedly made some pretty bold demands during his contract talks, asking for far more control than any Legia coach has ever had. Which, that's classic Feio. The guy's always been unpredictable, what can I say? I wasn't really his biggest fan either when he did get the job. It just felt so random and reeked out of desperation. But, to be fair, he did exceed my expectations somewhat, as, there were no major meltdowns like he had at Motor Lublin, and he worked well with the young players, which we already knew he could, and the squad generally backed him the whole time through. So, not too bad, but also not too great either. And again, that's his lack of experience as a young coach still. But, it was always a gamble, and in the end, it didn't quite pay off. Meanwhile, Jagiellonia were, the opposite. Coach Adrian Siemieniec, also a young coach, delivered a podium finish and a strong Conference League run. I mean, yeah, strong for Jaga especially, making it to the quarterfinals and holding their own against Betis in the second leg with a 1-1 draw. That said, yeah, they did lack depth in key areas, and that's kinda why they didn't do as well as they could had. And I myself thought that last year's squad was also a bit stronger too, as with them losing players like Marcuk and Vdovic, it didn't exactly help them, and the players that did get to fill in those roles weren't at the same level. Not to mention now that they've lost even more players, it's going to be hard to say if Jaga will be able to maintain the same quality or even style of play going into next season. Siemieniec is a great coach, but even he can only do so much with limited resources. So it's going to be interesting to see how Jaga is going to be looking like next season. Again, it's going to depend on what kind of transfers they make. It's going to be a make or break for them right in that department. Now, let's take a quick look at the Pierwsza Liga playoffs, which wrapped up also over the weekend. And we had Arka Gdynia and Termilika, which were already promoted, so they didn't have to go through the playoffs. Really, the playoffs only came down to Wisła Płock, Polonia Warszawa, Wisła Kraków, and Miedź Legnica. So 4 teams playing for the third promotion spot. And personally, I was hoping for either Polonia or Kraków to go through, just mainly for the derby potential. As I mean, well, who wouldn't want the Warsaw Derby or the Kraków Holy War back in the top flight, right? But it wasn't meant to be. Polonia fell to Płock 1-2 in a tight match, and Kraków, despite dominating, they just couldn't finish. They threw everything, including the kitchen sink, at the net, and still lost 0-2 to Miedź. It's honestly wild how Wisła Kraków has bottled promotion 3 years in a row, especially since their time in the Pierwsza Liga was only supposed to be short-lived, and yet now they're going into their 4th season there, so yeah, so much history at this club, so much potential, and yet mismanagement continues to hold them back. In the end, it'll be Wisła, but the one from Płock who returns to the Ekstraklasa after beating Miedź 2-0 in the playoff final. And yeah, they weren't my first choice, but credit where it's due. Plus, they've got a solid coach in Mariusz Mizuria and one of the best-looking modern stadiums in the Pierwsza Liga in Poland. So, yeah, it may be a little too good-looking for that league. It deserves to be an Ekstraklasa, of course, so it's good to see them back in the top tier. If anything, the Pierwsza Liga is going to be looking a lot better stadium-wise now that Śląsk Wrocław has been relegated, and they've got one of the best stadiums, like, overall in Poland, and yeah, it's gonna be weird seeing that stadium in the Pierwsza Liga and not the Ekstraklasa, but yeah, Śląsk, they stunk it up this season, what can I say? So hopefully they'll be back next Ekstraklasa season, because mainly just for that stadium and the city overall. It's a big city and big fan base too. They don't really deserve to be in the Pierwsza Liga. The Ekstraklasa needs more big cities like Wrocław and less villages like Termilika. You know, no offense to Termilika, but it is what it is. Now, okay, let's turn our attention to the Polish national team and the June call-ups. Because, as a reminder, Poland will first take on Moldova in a friendly on June 6th in Chorzów. before flying out to Helsinki for the big World Cup qualifier against Finland on June 10th. So yeah, even though we've only got one qualifier this month, I'd argue that the Moldova match still carries some weight. This time, well, it's personal. So yeah, who did Michał Probierz call up now? Well, he called up a total of 27 players. And let's talk about it. Among those 27 players, we got 4 goalkeepers in Marcin Bułka, Łukasz Skorupski, Mateusz Kocholski, and Bartosz Mrozek. And what can I say, it's really standard stuff here, as neither Mrozek or Kocholski will be playing. They're just mainly there for the training experience, and that's about it. If anything, I can see maybe Bułka getting some time in goal against Moldova, and then of course Skorupski playing against Finland. When it comes to the defense, there are 8 players called up in Jan Bednarek, Bartosz Beresinski, Maciej Kaś, Paweł Dawidowicz, Jakub Kiwior, Mateusz Krzypczak, and Sebastian Walukiewicz, and Mateusz Wieteska. And this one, well, it's a tad tricky, as really out of the bunch of these guys, only Kiwi and Krzypczak are what I'd call currently defenders in form. The rest have either not been playing for their clubs, got relegated with their clubs like Bednarek and Beres, or just recently been playing below their standards, like Kaś, whose mistake last match in shortchanging Martinez with a bad back pass, which in turn put the Argentinian in trouble and saw them concede and lose to a not-so-great Man United, essentially, well, costing Aston Villa a Champions League spot for next season. So yeah, not a good look there. Still, if I had to go here, I could see Kaś starting next to Bednarek and Kiwi, only because that would be technically the safest option for Probierz to go for the Moldova game. But still, I'd prefer we at least experiment somewhat, since it is a friendly after all, so hopefully Krzypczak impresses this time during practice and gets time on the pitch over the likes of, Bednarek. But yeah, not much else to say about our defense. It is what it is. It's been rather lousy for quite some time now. As for midfield, we've got 12 players in Mateusz Bogus, Przemysław Frankowski, Kamil Grosicki, Jakub Kamiński, Jakub Moder, Maxi Ojedele, Jakub Piotrowski, Oskar Repka, Bartosz Ślis, Sebastian Szymański, Nikola Zalewski, and Piotr Zielinski. And really, it's safe to say our midfield is looking like our best strength for this camp, at least on paper. As for guys like Bogus, Frankowski, Ojedele, and Piotrowski all won silverware with their respective clubs this season. And even those who didn't still performed quite well, like Zalewski, who even got playing time for Inter Milan in the Champions League final. Granted, they got absolutely stomped by PSG, but that was already the case when Zalewski came on as a sub in the second half, and by then, the game was already long lost. He couldn't really change anything by himself. What he did provide was some much-needed energy and pep, even not being afraid to take a shot on target too, which I think was Inter's first shot of the game. On target, I mean. So sure, Inter still lost, but hey, Zalewski did get to play in the final, and he was still better than Di Marco, and really, he's only getting better and better with each experience of Inter, as he's now been shifted over a central midfield role, and he just feels far more comfortable there, so it's going to be interesting to see if Probierz is going to also play him in that position on the national team after seeing what he can do for Inter there. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Unfortunately, Zielinski didn't appear off of the bench in that game, and really, what can I say? It looks like his time at Inter may be coming to a close this summer. So that may end up being for the better for him? I don't know. We'll see on that. But at the very least, we know that he'll come to training camp with fresh legs. Which is good, because if he does play against Moldova, that's going to be his 100th cap for the national team. So, yeah, he better have a good performance for that game if he does play. As we all remember how his first game against Moldova went, and I think the first goal that we conceded was actually due to Zielinski giving the ball away and Moldova scoring on the counter. Nightmares just thinking about that game. But yeah, really the main question when it comes to midfield for us is right now, who's going to be playing defensive midfield? And well, we've got about 4 options there right now in Moder, Oyadele, Slis, and the rookie Repka. For Moldova, I wouldn't really mind if Probierz were to go ballsy and start either Oyadele or even Repka, mainly because, well, we're all very much aware of what Moder and Slis bring to the table in this position. The other 2 guys, not so much. The last time Oyadele played for Poland, he was a newbie himself and couldn't really handle the pressure. Like, for example, starting against Portugal of all teams too. And as a result, he was non-existent on the pitch. But since that game last year, he's improved a lot, especially his confidence, and we saw that in full display in the second leg Conference League match against Chelsea, where Legia won at Stamford Bridge and Maxi put on a man-of-the-match performance, basically toying with Premier League level players. So if he can bring that same exact attitude to the national team, then we'll seriously be cooking in the defensive midfield position. Additionally, Repka is also pretty interesting too, as the guy is an imposing defensive midfielder in some current insane form. Having already scored like 5 goals in his last 6 matches, yeah, that's pretty good. Now, granted, we do need to keep our expectations in check here still, because rookies, especially those coming from the Ekstraklasa, don't always excel in their first training camp, and they usually need some time before they do get going. But if Repka does get his chance and takes advantage of it, well, all the more better for Poland. Plus, Probierz knows him somewhat as well too, as Repka had previously been on trial during Probierz's time as coach at Cracovia, so maybe he'll be a bit more relaxed playing under a coach he's at least familiar with. Who knows? Oh, and yeah, it also goes without saying that the Moldova match will be Kamil Grosicki's final with the Biało-Czerwoni. So yeah, definitely for sure expect him to get some minutes in there in the end as well. Finally, for the striker department, we've only got 3 names in here, in Adam Buksa, Krzysztof Piątek, and Karol Świderski. So, safe to say it's rather slim pickings here. Especially after Robert Lewandowski decided to skip out on a June training camp in order to take a rest from his long intensive season. And that news itself divided a lot of people, with some seeing it as some sort of scandal and Levy not acting like a true captain, while others simply agreed that the guy is now old and needs a break after such a tough season. But either way you fall in this debate, it all ends in the same situation we're currently in, and that is we won't have him for these 2 matches. And on one hand, yeah, sure, it ain't ideal, but we've gotta start to learn to play without him already, as I've got a feeling that he'll end up retiring from the national team after the World Cup. And considering we don't exactly have any promising strikers up and coming from our youth teams, then yeah, it ain't looking good there. But regardless, we do have to learn to manage regardless. Now, looking at the form alone of our strikers, I can see Piątek probably being the favorite to start here, Given, of course, his impressive run in Turkey this season, netting 21 goals in 33 league games. Plus, well, considering it was only just recently announced that he has decided to transfer to Al Duhail in Qatar. So now there's also question marks if he'll even be able to continue being called up anymore. So if anything, yeah, better use him now while he's still in form. Lastly, I think we've also at least got to mention some of the omissions here, like that of Kasper Urbański and Jan Zielkowski. Urbański, for example, well, his omission isn't exactly a shocker. The kid has been riding the bench for the last place team in Serie A and is currently going through a pretty rough patch. Probierz decided to take a gamble on him and call him up for the March training camp before, just to see if Urbański's form really was that bad. And turns out it was bad enough that he couldn't even sniff out any minutes against the likes of Lithuania nor Malta. And considering that his situation hasn't changed since then, if anything, it got worse, then I'm not surprised he's not in the senior national squad. Now, with that said, some folks are disappointed that Urbański didn't at the very least get called up to the under-21 Poland team, who this June will be taking part in the under-21 Euros in Slovakia. But I myself, I get it. I get why they didn't, as why would they take a kid who's in the worst form of his career and only ever played like one game with them, which was like the 0-1 loss to Bulgaria, and Urbański there didn't necessarily impress either. So sure, it would have been nice to at least see him join the under-21 team, but at the same time, again, I can understand the under-21 Poland coach Adam Majewski's decision to pass on him. Although, on the other hand, I do have a harder time understanding him not wanting Jan Zielkowski, who's currently in top form for Legia at just 19 years old. Especially when there were reports too that Probierz wanted to take Zielkowski for the senior team, but had to give him up because Majewski was considering him for the under-21 Euros. And yeah, he even admitted that he was considering on taking Zielkowski, but in the end decided to pass on him in favor of guys who, while not as in similar or good form, he at least trusts them because they've been core players on the under-21 team, unlike Zielkowski, who is a nobody on that team. Man, it's just a shame that Probierz didn't actually push to take Zielkowski from the under-21 team like he did with Oyedele. But at the same time, I do understand Probierz wanting to help out the under-21 team as much as possible, as after all, he was the under-21 coach before that started the qualification process for the under-21 Euros, before, of course, becoming seleccioner. And yeah, that goes without saying why our squad currently is the way it is, for the June camp at least. Which is, of course, a real lack of youth prospects in there, and that's mainly because he's agreed to let the under-21 team take priority here. Since, well, you know, they're playing in an actual final tournament, unlike the senior team. So, if anything, especially based on how Poland does at the under-21 Euros, it's going to be interesting to see the senior squad for the September training camp. And especially which boys from the under-21 team will Probierz promote to the senior squad. So yeah, that should be a very interesting month, especially since we're also going to be playing the Netherlands then too. Which, just like Moldova, it's going to be another rematch, which we're going to be hoping for some good old-fashioned payback. But, yeah, I think that's a wrap on things for now. Despite the under-21 team taking priority, this squad, well, I still think it has enough quality to handle Finland and settle the score once and for all with Moldova. No doubt that Probierz and the players will definitely be fired up for that one. This has been your host, Pat Novak. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.